All right, everyone, in this one, we're going to be moving on to Rafa's skill tree. If you watched the Vex skill tree breakdown, you know that was an hour long. So to make this one shorter, if you want information just on how skill trees as a whole are going to work, definitely be sure to go check out the Vex video. This one, I'm only going to go over all the skills, capstones, and augments, just so we can jump right into it. With that being said, though, I am still going to go super in depth with all of the skills and talk about synergies as I go along. It's not just going to be me straight up reading everything back to back to back. And of course, if you would like more information just about the game, I do have my first impressions up on the channel as well. I want to give a massive thank you to 2K for flying me out and letting me capture all this gameplay early, because if it wasn't for them, I couldn't have any of these videos up for you all. Be sure to stick around to the channel because there's going to be a lot more Borderlands 4 content coming in the future. And without further ado, let's just jump right into the skill trees. All right, starting off, every Vault Hunter is going to have a passive now, and Rafa's passive is going to be Overdrive. So whenever Rafa activates an action skill, he enters Overdrive. While an action skill is active, Overdrive's duration does not decrease. While Overdrive is active, gain increased movement speed and deal increased damage with all sources. So just like Vex's skill tree, keep this in mind because a lot of Rafa's skills will actually play into this passive, and obviously getting more movement speed and damage just whenever you have an action skill up is going to be very, very solid. All right, so let's start off taking a look at the red skill tree. So for your action skill, you have Peacebreaker Cannons. Equip Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons, which automatically fire at enemies and Rafa's crosshairs, dealing kinetic gun damage. If the enemy dies or you press the mouse button, the Peacekeeper Cannons find a new target. Holding F ends Peacekeeper Cannons and refunds a portion of the remaining action skill duration as action skill cooldown. So essentially with these, this is one of the most passive action skills I think we've ever seen. You simply just click the button and you are going to have two turrets pop up on your shoulder that literally just shoot whatever you're looking at. Obviously, you can interact with them to make them go away earlier to get some action skill cooldown, or if you want to command it to find a new target, you can do that as well. But essentially, just popping these, you're going to have these up for a good duration. They do passive damage, and this obviously will work with his passive quite a lot because you will get that bonus movement speed and damage because Overdrive will be active. But all right, moving on to the first skill, we have CTR. Rafa gains increased gun damage. This is a very simple one. You just get increased gun damage. Also want to go on and apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of these skill names. I am sorry, but hopefully we can still get the information out there for you all. All right, but next up we have Deft Hands. Rafa and his Peacebreaker Cannons gain increased fire rate. Another very simple one. You get more fire rate, your Peacebreaker Cannons get more fire rate. There's really nothing to hate about this. Now next up is going to be Shield Barriers, Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased shield recharge rate and improved shield regen delay while Overdrive is active. So like I said earlier, definitely be sure to keep Overdrive in mind because now when you have his passive active, you're going to get more shield recharge rate and delay. This is obviously a very good defensive skill, and if you're playing heavy into shields, this could be very, very good. Next up is going to be Sia, Kill skill. Killing an enemy restores shields based on Rafa's maximum health capacity. So once again, another shield skill. You can already kind of see a theme here. They want you to play around shields. This is going to be great because it's based on your maximum health capacity. So imagine if you have a lot of maximum health, you're going to be getting a lot of shield back. Now next up is the first augment for Peacebreakers, and this is Bullet Buddy Deluxe. Whilst Peacebreaker Cannons are active, Rafa and his allies regenerate ammo. Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons deal bonus fire damage based on how full his gun is, and his turrets shoot exploding bullets while his magazine is full. Pressing F while Peacebreaker Cannons are active causes Rafa shots to not consume ammo, but causes his action skill duration to drain faster. So I'm pretty sure in our playtest, they actually talked about how they're going to nerf this because that consume no ammo part was absolutely insane. You could literally just press this and your gun could have infinite ammo. I think that is going to be toned back a little bit, but the other part of this is that you and your allies will also regenerate ammo, which is nice. But on top of that, you deal bonus fire damage based on how full your magazine is. And if you haven't shot a single bullet, your turrets are going to now shoot exploding bullets. This could be a very, very interesting setup if you're really trying to just take full advantage of your Peacebreaker Cannons. The only time you shoot is when you activate the other part of this augment. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if there's some like crazy, fire splash damage setup. I can see this being very, very good. Now next up is Field Repair. So whenever Rafa activates an action skill, restores a portion of his maximum shield capacity. If his shields are already full, gain an overshield. And here we go again, the third shield based skill. Now whenever you pop your action skill, you're going to get shields restored. If you pair that with the other skill to get that increased recharge rate and duration delay, you're going to be able to obviously activate the passive when you use your action skill, get a bunch of shields, then have the other Overdrive skill going off, which is nice. Now for the next augment, we have Instanto. Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons gain increased critical hit chance. Pressing F while Peacebreaker Cannons are active causes them to double their critical hit chance and gain increased critical hit damage while also causing his action skill duration to drain faster. Kill skill. Killing an enemy causes Rafa to regain action skill duration while also causing his action skill duration to drain faster. So if you're playing big into critical hits, this is obviously going to be a good one to take. You just get critical hit chance, you get more crit damage when you activate it. But I think the other main part of this this is that now when you get kills, it's going to increase this active skill duration, so your Peacebreaker cannons can actually stay active for quite a while longer. It is going to cause your active skill to drain faster, but I imagine if you're slaying out, that's not going to be that huge of a deal. So being able to just have a very, very long uptime of this is obviously going to be good. And then pairing that with his passive, you can have overdrive up quite a lot. Now, next up, we have Whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy, active skill duration is restored. So obviously this is going to pair very well with our previous augment. If you get critical hits, active skill duration is going to come back, so you can just have your Peacebreaker cannons up for quite a while. Keep in mind that these skills will actually work with other active skills as well. This is not only for Peacebreaker cannons, it's obviously just in the specific skill tree that active skill is in. Now, next up is Resiliencia, overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased damage reduction while overdrive is active. Obviously, this is going to be a very, very good one. With everything being able to keep overdrive up in this skill tree, now you're going to be able to just get increased damage reduction. As you see, it is at 8% already and has 5 points in the skill, so I imagine you're going to be able to get some crazy damage reduction, and it's going to really, really take up the survivability for Rafa, especially pairing that with all of his shield based skills. The next up is Maestro. So Rafa gains increased skill damage. So if you really just want to increase your Peacebreaker cannon damage, this is definitely the one to take. Your turrets can just now do a little bit more damage. And next up is a fun one. We have Venganza. So whenever Rafa's shield breaks after being fully recharged, spawn a free grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. So since the other skills really want you to play around getting your shield up, this would be a nice 1 point to take, as if you do have like a legendary grenade, you could just always throw these grenades for free whenever your shield does break. However, it may be a little counterintuitive, because if you get to a point where your shields are never going to break, if you really build into them, you may not ever really see this proccing. So it may be better to actually not take the shield based skills and then just kind of let everything recharge on its own. But I don't know, we'll have to see how this plays out. I imagine if there are some OP grenades, this is going to be a very good skill. Next up is El Valiente. Rafa deals increased damage from all sources. The fuller Rafa shields are, the greater the bonus. While Rafa shields are at maximum capacity, double the bonus. So once again, another shield skill, a more offensive one, because you're going to get more damage based on how much your shield is charged. So if you could keep your shield at maximum capacity, you're basically going to double this. As you see, we're at 10%, it could be 3 skills. So imagine you can go from 30%. If it's double, you go to 60%. That is going to be a very good skill, pairing that with the damage that you do get from his passive as well. But again, this is kind of counterintuitive with the grenade skill, because you want your shields to be full. The other one, you want your shields to break. But overall, if you are playing heavy into just keeping your shields up, and especially if there's some crazy legendary shields, this is going to be some great synergy here. Now, moving down to the left part of the skill tree, we have Hell in a Shell. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to fire 2 large fire bombs that deal fire damage to a large area. Killing enemies reduces this skill's cooldown. So now essentially, whenever you command your Peacebreaker cannons to attack a target, you're just going to shoot out these giant fire bombs, and it has a cooldown of 50 seconds. So I imagine they're going to do a lot of damage. But the cool part is, if you're slaying out getting kills, it will take 5 seconds off, so you can constantly keep throwing these over and over again in high mob density areas. I think this could be pretty fun. There's nothing too crazy. There definitely are crazier augments. I mean, the 2 we read before, I feel like are crazier than this one, but if this does do a lot of damage, I can see this being pretty good. Or if you're just playing into a fire build. The next up is Asymmetric Warfare. Indirect projectiles gain increased damage. Indirect projectiles include all active skill weapons, thrown weapons, and projectiles not fired from your gun. So again, if you want to increase your Peacebreaker cannon skill damage here, you can definitely do so. But the thing I think they're trying to go for here is TDR weapons. Since Rafa basically has all the TDR tech on him, now they are really giving you a skill to play into TDR, because it does work on thrown weapons or even projectiles. So if there's any like TDR chucking build in the game, which I imagine there probably will be, this is definitely going to be a skill you want to take. Or if you just want to buff your actual damage as well, you can definitely take this one too. Now, next up is Rolling Stone. While moving, shots have a chance to bounce off Rafa, the chance is double while sliding. Rafa's whole thing is based about movement. Obviously, with his passive, you get the increased movement speed, and so now you just basically have even more survivability, pairing that with the damage reduction up top. You're now going to have bullets also bounce off of you. If you're sliding, it doubles the chance, and typically in games like this, you're constantly sliding over and over again, so this is pretty much going to be active almost permanently. So I imagine this could be very, very good. Now, next up is Ardid. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain lifesteal. So this is going to pair well with our other skill to increase our indirect projectile damage. Now they gain lifesteal. So again, if you're chunking TDRs everywhere, or if you just have your axe skill also granting lifesteal, it could be very good. And it's a plus 10% with 5 skills. So this could get up to 50%. I'm assuming that could be very, very good. Now, next up is Errant Spark. All indirect projectiles deal bonus fire damage. If the indirect projectile already deals fire damage, double the bonus damage. So once again, more indirect projectiles now can now just do bonus fire damage. and if you have a fire one, it does even more, which is very good. The next up is proprietary incendiary melee override. Press and hold V to lob a storm glider at an enemy. Once it reaches its target, it explodes and deals fire splash damage based on the amount of ammo in Rafa's gun when he threw the storm glider. So we didn't get to see what these look like in our playtesting, but I imagine it's just going to be a little drone that probably flies at an enemy, doing extra fire damage based on all the other fire damage we kind of have in this certain part of the skill tree. I imagine this could also be an indirect projectile. I'm not 100% sure, but if it is, you will get even more with our previous skills, also the lifesteal. But this is going to be based amount on the ammo he does have in his gun. So if you're at max, you're obviously going to get more damage. And if you are just playing into like a TD or reload build, you're pretty much always going to be at max. Typically you just shoot one shot and reload the gun. Now for the last skill in this part, it is lateral plinking. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain a chance to ricochet. So this is only a 1 point, it's 25% chance, but obviously if you have a ton of indirect projectiles out, there's a good chance some things are going to ricochet. So this could be very, very good for mobbing and a very fun skill. Now for the capstone on this part, we have double auto shot. So Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons weapons are replaced with shotguns that deal increased damage and have increased pellet count. Additionally, Rafa's turret gains a chance to ricochet off targets. Ricochets deal reduced damage and critical hits always ricochet. So now instead of having turrets, you essentially just going to have shotguns that can also ricochet. This could be very good depending on the amount of damage it does, and since these will technically count as indirect projectiles, everything else we've already went over in the skill tree will count for this as well. So I imagine with this ricochet paired with the other skill, you could have some crazy ricochets going off, also getting that bonus fire damage, lifesteal, everything of the sort, and have the increased movement speed on Rafa in general. You could just keep running enemies and maybe let your shotgun axe skill keep killing things over and over. This one could definitely be really fun. Now moving on to the middle part of the skill tree, the first thing we have is confetti. Rafa's ordnance deals bonus damage in his current weapon element. So as you see with Rafa, holding a weapon and not really shooting it is going to be kind of like the main way you want to use the skill tree. Now depending on whatever element you have, your ordnance damage is going to do even more. Ordnance again is going to be things like grenades, throwing knives, rockets, anything that just goes in that ordnance slot. So you can really build around that and have that extra damage based on the weapon element could be very, very good. Now for our augment in this part, we have Insta Fort Battle System. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons also deal ordnance damage, and he deals increased ordnance damage while Peacebreaker cannons are active. Press F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to disconnect from Rafa and become a turret companion that begins firing at enemies in place. Additionally, it will occasionally fire grenades at its targets. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, it copies that grenade. Press F again to return the turret's companion to Rafa's back. So obviously that is a lot in an augment, but essentially you could just make your turrets just become sentry turrets. They also shoot grenades if you have a grenade equipped, which you probably will because you're playing into ordnance in the skill tree. You're going to be able to just throw those grenades. It also does ordnance damage, so if you're building into ordnance damage, you could probably play into your other skills as well to make it do some elemental damage. And on top of that, if that was enough, Rafa will also do more ordnance damage while these are active as well. So overall, a very good augment if you are building into ordnance damage, and we'll have to see how this one plays out. Now next up is Vitriol. So the first shot fired from Rafa's fully loaded magazine deals bonus corrosive damage. This is a 11%, stacks up to 5 times, so I imagine it would go to 55%. So if you're running something like a sniper or even just like a slow firing Jacob's weapon in general, you can just get that first shot to do even more bonus damage, which is good. And I imagine this skill is going to be very strong. It is specifically in corrosive damage, so if you're going to get something that's resistant to corrosive, it won't be as good. But for anything else, and especially armor targets, this could be disgusting. And next up is Pain Reaction. So Rafa's weapons gain a chance to ricochet off an enemy with a status effect. Ricochet damage is based on the damage dealt. So once again, another ricochet skill. It seems like Rafa is going to be the ricochet character, but now if you have a status effect on an enemy, whenever you're shooting this enemy, you have a small chance for things to ricochet. It's only a 3% chance per status effect, but I imagine if you stack multiple status effects, you'll have a higher chance. And this also goes up to 5 points, so you'll probably get around 15% per status effect. So again, if you have a lot of status effects on enemy, it's almost going to guarantee a ricochet. But next up is Lightning Rod. So while aiming with a gun, Rafa deals bonus shock damage. Each time Rafa hits an enemy this way, deal increased bonus damage until he zooms out. So essentially this skill just wants you to aim. So if you're a natural hit fire player, like I know a lot of people are in Borderlands games, this is going to be a bad skill to take, but you're going to be getting bonus damage that stacks literally just for aiming. I imagine if there's some sniper that can constantly put ammo back in the magazine, that's going to pair really well with the corrosive skill. So the first shot of your magazine does bonus damage. This means you could just stay aimed down your sight with the sniper, constantly just keep doing bonus shock damage, doing that bonus corrosive damage. Or obviously if the affinity pistols in the game, this is obviously going to be very, very good paired with the other skill as well. You can kind of just fire this everywhere, keep stacking this damage up, and and I think it could be very, very fun. Now, next up is El Alacron. Enemies damaged by Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons have increased status effect chance. So obviously this is going to be extremely well paired with our Ricochet skill because we want to apply status effects. So now whenever the Peacebreaker cannons hits enemies, they just have increased status effect chance, so you can actually apply those status effects to make bullets ricochet. Now for the final skill in this middle part, we have Inspirado. Whenever Rafa inflicts a status effect on an enemy, gain increased action skill cooldown rate and improved action skill duration rate. This effect stacks. So again, applying status effects is what you want to do here. Pairing that with the other skills, so our action skill has increased chance to apply status effects. That means now this will just work well because we can get our action skill back a lot quicker and increase duration rate. And again, having status effects everywhere will let bullets ricochet. Now for the capstone of the skill tree, we have Beam Team. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons weapons are replaced with a shock beam and a corrosive beam. Each beam automatically locks onto enemies in your view and may lock onto different enemies. Whenever Rafa applies a status effect, gain increased action skill damage. So once again, we're applying more status effects. Your action skill will have shock and corrosive. You can obviously take any other weapon, say something just like an incendiary weapon. You can pair that with the other skills that also do corrosive and shock damage. You're going to be applying a lot of status effects with this specific middle tree, which again is going to lead into all of our other skills that will just work together. And I imagine if this specific capstone can stack with that increased damage, you could be doing some crazy damage with this action skill. Now moving on to the final bottom right part of the skill tree, we have Barrage, so overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased splash damage while overdrive is active. So if you're playing into a splash damage based build, or even if you take the augment where you basically make your Peacebreaker cannons do exploding shots, this could be very good. Remember, overdrive will always be active when you have an action skill up, so if you do have some explosive stuff going on when you're with Peacebreaker, this is definitely going to be a must-have to take. Now next up is unmissable missiles. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons is active causes them to fire a volley of homing rockets at enemies in a view at the cost of action skill duration. So another very simple augment here, but now basically you could just shoot rockets out of your Peacebreaker cannons, which is great. I imagine if you're playing into a splash damage based build though, I think the other augment will be better if you just never shoot your gun, but if you're shooting your gun, obviously this one is going to be a little bit better. We'll just kind of have to see how everything plays out, but you know, obviously this plays into splash damage as well. Now next up is overdrive gains increased duration. So this is going to be a solid one because basically when you get out of your active skill, there still is a duration that overdrive is active. It just slowly goes away. It gives you time to build up another active skill as fast as possible. And there is some gameplay loop to basically where you could just have infinite overdrive. This will be a point in the skill, but this could be the catalyst to actually implement that playstyle of having infinite overdrive, because if it does increase it just enough so you can get your active skill back, that means you can be in a permanent state of overdrive, and obviously that's going to be very good for a lot of the skills in his skill tree. So we'll just kind of have to wait to see how this one plays out, because basically if you can use your active skill and immediately get it back in like 2 seconds, I don't think this is going to be worth it. But if there is a long cooldown for that action skill, this one definitely could be worth it. Now next up is Devil May Care, so overdrive skill. While overdrive is active, Rafa gains increased movement speed and gains health regeneration. While overdrive is not active, Rafa takes increased damage and gains increased action skill cooldown rate. So this is another kiss curse type of skill here. So basically if you have overdrive active, you're getting buffs, even more movement speed stacked on top of what it already gives you, and the health generation, which is great for survivability. But if overdrive is not active, you're going to be taking increased damage. So if you do have a way to permanently stay in an overdrive state, these are just going to be great buffs to have. Having even more movement speed is going to be disgusting. The developers actually told us that when it comes to like world farming, Rafa is for sure the best, just because he has just insane movement speed if you build into it correctly. And I imagine this is probably one of the skills they're talking about, so I think this could be very fun. Now next up we have Temerario, overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased gun damage but decreased weapon handling. This bonus is based on how long overdrive has been active. So typically in games like this, weapon handling is honestly an okay trade-off for getting more damage. We'll just have to wait and see how the guns feel, but you get plus 1% and it can go up to 5 points. I imagine you'll get 5% per second. So if you are in a permanent overdrive state, if there's no cap to this, you're gonna be able to get some crazy increased gun damage here, and this skill could be very fun. Now next up is Soltado, kill skill, doubles all overdrive bonuses. So if the overdrive stuff wasn't already enough, now you're going to just double all the bonuses. This is going to be a kill skill, but obviously, you know, it's really not hard to kill enemies in the game. This does last for 8 seconds, just a 1-point skill. So for 8 seconds, you're just going to double every overdrive bonus that you have, and this could be absolutely disgusting. With all the movement speed he's already getting, now you can double that. you're actually going to be able to just zoom around the map. Now for the final capstone in this skill tree, we have volatile hollow points. So Rafa's Peacebreaker cannon's weapons are replaced with rockets that deal splash damage. So if you're worried about splash damage based stuff, obviously this is going to be very good because now you just shoot rockets out. I imagine pairing that with the augment, that will also make your bullets shoot exploding fire shots. You're just going to be able to cause a lot of damage. Obviously pairing that with the splash damage skill, this could be some crazy things. So if you really want to build into Peacebreaker cannons, there are some crazy augments and capstones in this skill tree. All right, moving on to Rafa's blue skill tree. For the action skill, we have the Apophis Lance. Equip Rafa's Apophis Lance, an offhand arm cannon that decreases Rafa's gun handling but allows him to fire piercing shock ordnance blast. Any unused charges when Apophis Lance ends are converted into action skill cooldown. Press the right mouse button to fire a piercing shock ordnance blast at enemies and consume a charge, or hold the right mouse button to charge Rafa's Apophis Lance for increased damage, projectile size, and projectile speed at the cost of more charges. So in all honesty, I didn't play around with this one too much during the play test, but essentially it does what it reads. It's just a second gun that you can equip. You can either shoot it 3 times or you can charge it up to release everything at once and basically have a better version of it. I'm not sure damage wise what the trade-off is going to be if you should just always charge it, but there are going to be some unique interactions with his passive, because obviously when you use an action skill you will get overdrive. So if you can keep 3 charges on standby, that means you could theoretically maybe have this passive up forever, since you do get increased cooldown if you don't use all the charges. On top of that, it does do shock ordnance damage, so if you want to build around ordnance, this is definitely going to be the action skill for you. But all right, taking a look at the first skill, we have Rinse. Rafa gains increased reload speed. This is a very simple skill. You're just going to get more reload speed. As you see, it's 4%, can stack up to 5 times, so it's probably going to be 20% at max. Next up is Las Horus, overdrive skill. Rafa regenerates ammo while overdrive is active. So if you need any ammo regeneration, this is obviously going to be very good. On paper, you would think, oh, I can just regenerate rockets, but rockets are now going to be moved to an ordnance slot. So this is only going to generate just normal bullet, I guess, base style weapons. So you're not going to just be getting infinite rocket launcher ammo, but this could still be very good depending on specific weapons in the game. Obviously, we don't know all the weapons yet, but just being able to regenerate ammo pretty much all the time, because again, this is based on your overdrive skill. The next up is the Thrill. So another overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased fire rate, gain further increased fire rate while overdrive is active. So this is great. You're just going to get some passive fire rate, but you get even more when overdrive is active. And again, anytime you activate the action skill, you're going to activate overdrive. This is going to be a very, very solid skill for literally anything in the game, but for bossing, it could be very good. Next up is Preparado. Whenever Rafa reloads his current gun, he gains increased active skill cooldown rate. This affects stacks. So this is going to be very solid if you're reloading a lot, kind of playing back into what I was talking about earlier with the TDR chunking. If you're just constantly, reloading TDR weapons over and over again, you can get your action skill back to further play into overdrive, everything of the sort. So I think this is going to be a very good skill to take for Rafa. Now moving on, we have our first augment, and that is Sangri pour Sangri. Whenever Rafa consumes a charge, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This bonus is increased for every charge consumed. So this is just playing into getting your action skill back up a lot more often. Again, if you want to keep this chain over and over again to keep overdrive up, I think this is going to be the action skill that you want to use. But remember, the charges that you don't use will also be converted back into action skill cooldown, so you can kind of pair those together and you can just get a bunch of cooldown rate. Now the next skill is Pod Dentro. Activating an action skill grants Rafa health regeneration. So this is nice. This is not based on your overdrive, so this is just an 8-second time period of just health generation whenever you use an action skill. Again, you can use one charge, get this to proc, get it back, use another charge, so you can kind of keep this up for a long time. It's just good for this survivability. Now next up, we have another augment, and that is Battery Subscription Service. Apophis Lance gains an additional charge. Additionally, whenever Rafa consumes 4 or more charges, gain increased action skill potency. Now I'm gonna be real with you, I don't know what action skill potency means. I assume it's probably just more damage, but it may be everything like increased size, increased projectile speed, anything of the sort. But the other main benefit is that you will get another charge now. So with this, you actually are going to want to use all 4 charges. I imagine just charging them up, using all 4 immediately is going to be very, very good with this augment, and it's going to be a lot less of just shooting one, letting it cool down, shooting another one, stuff like that. The next up is Arriba, kill skill. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy, he gains increased ordnance cooldown rate. So if you are playing heavy into an ordnance build, which is what this whole skill tree I think wants you to do, this is going to be great, because now when you ever kill an enemy, you're going to get cooldown back. Ordnance is again going to be rockets, grenades, anything of the sort like that. They are on cooldowns now, but you can build into them specifically with skill skills like this, so you can use them a lot more often. Now the next skill is First Impressions. The first shot fired from a fully loaded weapon magazine gains increased damage. Obviously this is very good paired with the other skill, to where if you shoot a fully loaded gun, you will do extra corrosive damage. Now you're just going to be doing even more damage. So again, if there's like an infinity pistol in the game, or just any weapon sort of like that, or a way just to constantly keep ammo in your mag, Rafa is going to be disgusting with them. Next up is Al Centro, Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with all weapons and action skills while Overdrive is active. The longer Overdrive has been active, the greater the bonus. So as you see, it is 1% per second. It can go up to 5 points, so I imagine it'll go 5% per second. Again, if it can stack infinitely, this could be very good. I'm not sure how much weapon handling is going to be a stat that you want to chase, but if you remember in our other skill tree, there was one that reduced weapon handling but gave damage while Overdrive was active. So this could be a very good pairing to actually negate the minus weapon handling that you're getting, and you'll probably end up with more weapon handling, but on top of that, you still get the increased damage. This is an interesting skill. You're definitely going to want to like combine it with something else. I think at base, unless you just really like fast weapon handling, I don't think you're going to take it. The next up is Metal Management. Whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, his guns consumes no ammo. So this is a 1 skill point. It has a duration of 2 seconds. So essentially you can use 1 charge. Now you have 2 seconds of infinite ammo. You can then use another charge, have another 2 seconds of infinite ammo. That is going to be very good. Obviously, again, pair that with the skill to where if you fire the first shot in a fully loaded magazine, you're going to be able to get that damage boost up a lot. So you can just keep shooting 1 action skill, get that damage. Again, pair that with the corrosive one as well. There could be some crazy things you could do with Metal Management. Now, next up is Abajo. Whenever Rafa throws a grenade, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. So again, play it into ordnance here again, so you can throw grenades. You're going to get more action skill cooldown rate. Getting kills with the other skill, getting kills will reduce the ordnance cooldown rate. So you could probably just keep a permanent action skill cooldown rate up at all times if you're slaying out enough. This is a pretty interesting skill. I think it's just kind of a no-brainer passive one to take, again, if you are playing into grenades. Now moving down to the bottom left, our first skill is Brain Dump, Overdrive skill. Rafa gains critical hit chance with his guns while Overdrive is active. So this is going to be very solid because again, if you have a way to keep Overdrive up permanently, you're just always going to have more critical hit chance. It's a 5% with 5 skill points, so you probably just have a permanent 25% increased critical hit chance, which is good. Now next up is Ojo Rojo. Apophysis Lance gains critical hit chance. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with Apophysis Lance, gain further increased critical hit chance. So as you see, it is a 40%, and then when you use one, it will give another 35%. So after firing 2 shots, that third one is pretty much 100% going to crit no matter what, which is very, very good. So if you're playing into just shooting single shots, this is definitely one you're going to want to take. I guess if you charge it up all the way, you do have a 40% chance for it to crit, but I think this really just wants you to play into firing 1 at a time. Now next up is Conductivo. Rafa gains increased status effect chance and also gains further increased shock chance. So another status effect style thing. This will obviously pair well with the other status effect skills in our previous tree, but it does also really enhance the shock chance. So if you really want to play around with shock weapons, this is definitely the skill tree to do so. And next up is El Catrin. After sliding, Rafa's active skill deals bonus shock damage and he deals increased critical hit damage. So as you see, the duration for this is 3 seconds after sliding. I assume you could just keep proccing this slide over and over again. So this is probably going to be a very strong skill. You're going to get bonus shock damage and bonus crit damage. So again, playing into shock weapons and also just the crit damage is always good on anything. This is going to be a very, very good skill. You can even pair this with the other skills, so while sliding, bullets will ricochet off of you, and you can have a crazy slot setup going on. If they bring back the Snowdrift artifact or something like it, it's going to be disgusting. Now next up is All. So whenever Rafa shocks an enemy, all shots fired at that enemy are critical hits. This does have a duration of 2 seconds. It's just a 1-point skill, but now whenever you just shock an enemy, it almost is kind of acting like slag in a way, because you're just going to be doing more damage because you're guaranteed a critical hit for 2 seconds. With the other skill granting increased critical hit damage and shock damage, that's obviously going to be a disgusting combination, and I imagine if you can just shock everything, this is literally going to be disgusting. Now next up is Fiesta. So whenever Rafa applies a status effect, his active skill consumes no duration and Apophysis Lance consumes no charges. So again, play it into status effects here, and it's not just shock. This is any status effect. Your active skill is going to consume no duration, or your Apophysis Lance won't use a charge. This is going to be very good to keep Overdrive up, but also if you're just playing big into your action skill, this is going to give you a crazy amount of uptime, which could be very, very good. Now for the capstone of this part, we have Project Raiju. So Apophysis Lance weapon is replaced with a close range shocking taser burst. Pressing and holding causes Rafa to deal shock damage all around him. The longer Rafa holds his attack, the greater damage it deals. So now instead of having a projectile gun like thing, you can basically just cause an AoE around you, which could be pretty good. It seems like you could charge it up like the normal Apophysis Lance would, but it's going to get more damage. It's a 50% per second, which is kind of disgusting. And then of course it is doing shock damage, so pairing that with everything else based around shock in this skill tree, this could be very, very good. Now moving on to the middle part, we have Drone Defense. So when Rafa activates an ordnance, spawn storm gliders that hover near him. As he takes damage, transfer some of that damage to his storm gliders. Once a storm glider receives too much damage, it explodes, dealing corrosive splash damage to nearby enemies. So you have more storm gliders here, and this is obviously of course also playing into ordnance. So whenever you're throwing grenades or just doing anything of the sort with ordnance, you're going to spawn these around you. You could have a maximum of 3, it seems like, and then just whenever you take damage, they will eventually explode, causing corrosive splash damage specifically, and this could potentially be very good. Again, we didn't really get to play around with these storm gliders, so we'll just have to wait and see once the game is fully out, but I imagine just constantly having these up, if you can spam ordnance over and over again, could be very good. Now for our augment in this part, we have Gimmick module. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy with his Apophysis Lance, spawn a free grenade on that enemy. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a copy of that grenade instead. So once again, Rafa is really incentivizing running grenades when it comes to that ordnance slot, because now getting a kill with your axe skill will spawn a grenade. It will actually use the copy of the grenade, so if you have a crazy legendary grenade, I imagine this augment could be very, very good. And remember, the Apophysis Lance does do ordnance damage, so buffing ordnance damage not only is going to just buff the grenade here itself, but it also buff the axe skill as well. The next up is El Soldado Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased gun damage while Overdrive is active. The bonus is doubled while Rafa is charging Apophysis Lance. So once again, another gun damage skill. This is obviously going to be very good to take. Just when Overdrive's active, you're getting more gun damage. If you're charging the Apophysis Lance, this is also going to grant more damage. So with this skill tree, it seems like they're going to play into the fact that they want you to charge it up. You can guarantee a kill to drop that grenade, but also by charging, you get the gun damage. Now next up is Detonation. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with an action skill, place a remote detonator on that enemy. Ordnance Override. Detonate all remote detonators. Remote detonators gain increased damage and increased splash radius for every remote detonation. So this is a very interesting one, because damaging any enemy with an axe skill, it doesn't even have to be the Apophysis Lance. This will work with anything, which could be crazy with the Peacebreaker cannons. You could then activate your ordnance button to basically just blow all these remote detonators up that you are placing on them. And depending on the amount of damage that this does in game, this could be very, very good. It kind of reminds me of Nisha from the pre-sequel. Whenever your axe skill would end, you would basically just, detonate everything and cause the explosion damage. So I imagine how this one's going to kind of work, but it's just going to be based on your ordnance, and then also again your axe skill is what's going to apply it. Now next up is the right tools. So Rafa gains increased ordnance damage after reloading his gun. This bonus stacked. So this is 12% ordnance damage, has a max of 10 stacks, and this is a 5-point skill. So you're going to be able to do some crazy ordnance damage, and all you have to do is reload. So imagine taking a very fast TDR reload, or just any gun that reloads very quick. This is going to be disgusting. And again, with the other skill, you can reload the gun to get your axe skill cooldown rate back. So again, play it to Apophysis Lance, which the Apophysis Lance can also spawn grenades if you get kills. So there's going to be some disgusting things you could do with this. I think the right tools is going to be very good in specific ordnance-based builds. The next up is Drone Assault. So whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, send out one of his storm gliders at an enemy in his view. Once it arrives, it explodes in a corrosive explosion equal to its remaining health. So this is just a 1-point skill, and it clearly is attached to the other skill, to where basically you can spawn the storm gliders. Now whenever you just re-trigger an action skill or activate an action skill, it'll just send one out instead of it just exploding around you. So this can be good again if you are playing into the storm gliders, if they are good. So you can basically get a bunch up, activate the axe skill, and just start sending them out. It has some good synergy, but I just don't know how strong they're going to be. Now for the capstone on this middle part, we have Project Basilisk. Apophysis Lance now fires a corrosive blob that leaves a corrosive hazard and splits into several smaller projectiles whenever it detonates. The more charges Apophysis Lance consumes at once, the more it splits. So clearly here with the skill tree, again, they want you to charge up the Apophysis Lance, and you're basically just going to make this giant corrosive blob. Again, like I said in my Vex skill tree breakdown, I'm pretty sure a hazard is just going to be a pool of element on the ground. So I assume the Apophysis Lance will just kind of go out, leave a pool in the ground of dot damage, then it'll split. The more you charge it up, the more it's going to split. So it seems like a very, very good mobbing type ordeal. And again, if you take the augment for this, you can also spawn a grenade. So there could potentially be some crazy AoE damage you can do with this. Now moving on to the bottom right, our first skill is going to be Jackie. So whenever Rafa damages an enemy with a skill, he gains a stack of Jackie. For every stack of Jackie, he gains increased overdrive bonuses whenever overdrive ends, lose all stacks. So essentially with this one, you want to build up these stacks. You're going to get these overdrive bonuses. It does stack up to 20 times. It is a plus 1%, so I imagine it's going to go to 5%. So having a 100% increase to your overdrive benefits if you are at max stacks could be disgusting. And again, if your overdrive does end, you will lose all of the stacks, but as you can already tell from all of these skills, it's going to be pretty easy to keep your overdrive up. Now for our augment in this part, we have Engorged Boar. So Apophis Lance gains increased projectile size, projectile speed, and increased number of chains. So if you just really want to buff your Apophis Lance up in a bunch of different ways, this is a very simple augment to take. Again, projectile speed, size, and more chains. It's just going to do more damage, a lot easier to use. This is a great thing to slot in. Now next up is Largaza. So overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with weapons and active skills while overdrive is active. So again, another weapon handling based skill. So I imagine with Rafa, you're going to be able to just constantly swap through weapons if you spec into all of these weapon handling skills, and this is going to be based on your overdrive. And the other benefit is that it also does increase your active skills as well, so it'll work well with the Apophis Lance. The next up is Deadline. So overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased fire rate and increased reload speed while overdrive is active. So if you want even more reload speed and fire rate, this is going to be great because again, with overdrive, you can have this up almost permanently, it seems like, and now you're just going to get even more benefits. Now next up is Mate. So when overdrive ends, convert all Jackie stacks into Mate stacks. Gain increased active skill cooldown rate for every stack of Mate. Once Rafa active skill is ready, lose all stacks of Mate. So this is obviously going back into our other skill that we were just mentioning. Now instead of losing all of the Jackie stacks, it's going to convert them into Mate stacks, which just grant increased active skill cooldown rate, which is obviously going to be very, very good. You can get a max stack of 20 with 3% per stack at 5 points in. So you're going to have some crazy cooldown rate if you do get to the max stacks of the Jackie stacks when they do convert. Now for the final skill in this part, we have Per My Last. So whenever Rafa deals damage with an active skill to an enemy, he gains a chance to deal that damage again. So this is a 4% chance to 5 points, so it'll get up to 20% chance, I'm assuming. So if you are playing heavy into an active skill, this is going to be great. Again, this doesn't have to work with just Apophis Lance. This can work, with the Peacemaker cannons or even our next active skill, which we'll talk about here in a second. You're just going to get double damage, and double damage is obviously always very good. Now for our capstone on this part, we have Project Gorgon. So Apophis Lance weapon is replaced with an incendiary laser that pierces enemies. Pressing and holding the right mouse button causes the laser to deal increased damage and change to more enemies as it consumes charges. So now you're basically just going to have a laser beam that you can pull out. It's going to do incendiary damage. This reminds me a lot of the disintegration skill from Diablo. You can even chain it of all that sorts. I imagine this is going to be very good, especially if you are building into fire damage, and I can't wait to see how this actually looks in game. All right, moving on to Rafa's final green skill tree. For his action skill, he will have arc knives. Rafa puts down his guns and equips his arc knives, blades that deal melee damage and mark enemies. Whenever they damage them, causing them to take increased damage for every mark on them. Use left mouse to perform a melee attack with Rafa's arc knives. Use right mouse to dash forward and perform a shock melee attack, and press F to unleash Rafa's Blade Fury, which deals shock damage to all marked enemies and ends the skill. So this is definitely one of the most interesting action skills we've ever seen in a Borderlands game. As it reads, you literally put down your weapon, you go in third person, and you run around with 2 blades. So this is for sure going to be the main focused melee character, and the action skill just further plays into that. Be sure to keep in mind all the little things that it could do between marking all the different attacks, because they will come into play with the skill tree. All right, jumping into the first skill, we have Handshake Deal. Rafa gains increased gun damage and melee damage. This is just a solid passive skill to have. Obviously more gun damage is always great, but if you're playing heavy into melee with this skill tree, the melee damage is going to be very good. The next up is Midnight Oil. So Rafa's action skill deals bonus corrosive damage. The longer the skill has been active, the greater the bonus. So as you see here, we are getting a percentage per second, and I imagine this can just stack infinitely because it doesn't say it has a stat count. So the longer you're in your action skill, you're just going to be able to just do more corrosive damage, and there are going to be ways to basically stay in this action skill forever and also get it back very quickly. So this is going to be great to get that bonus damage. The cool part is that the normal base melee does shock damage. Now it just adds on some extra corrosive damage. So even though Rafa is kind of focused on on melee, it's also somewhat of an elemental character too. The next up is Expedite, so overdrive skill. Overdrive grants Rafa further increased movement speed. So if you want even more movement speed on this character, now here's another skill you can take. It's also at the very top, so it's a 5-point skill at 5% at base. So pairing that with what the passive already gives you, you're going to be able to zoom around the map. The next up is Dialed In. So whenever Rafa damages an enemy with a melee attack, his melee attacks gain critical hit chance. This chance stacks, and all stacks are removed whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy. So this is going to be great if you are heavily playing into melee, because now you can keep meleeing an enemy over and over again. Not only are you going to mark them because of your action skill, you can also now just start stacking up critical hit chance. You'll eventually get a critical hit. This is going to be good for taking your targets, or maybe doing some extra boss damage as well, because the more you melee a single target, you will eventually just get a critical hit. And then obviously you'll also play into some other skills too. Now for our first augment, we have Altered Cabron. So whenever Rafa kills the enemy while Arc Knives is active, restore a portion of his maximum health capacity. Whenever Rafa gains health, deal bonus corrosive damage with all attacks and increase movement speed. This affects stacks. So as you see here, the max stat count is 25, and you get some crazy bonuses. You get 15% corrosive damage, 10% movement speed. Obviously getting health on kills is very good for survivability, but stacking this up to 25 times, if you are in your action skill for a while, you're going to be able to do some insane damage and also have good survivability. Pairing that with the perk where you get more corrosive damage the longer you're in your action skill, this could be very, very good. Now our next skill is El Corazon. So a portion of Rafa's maximum health capacity is converted into maximum shield capacity. So another shield based skill for Rafa. If you want to play heavy into shields, I think this is going to be a good character for that. This is obviously just going to reduce your health, give you more shields based on the health that got reduced. So overall, I think this could be pretty good, especially if there's certain builds that can go around it. Now our next augment is Dead Man Walking. So Arc Knives does not end when its duration runs out. Instead, it only ends if Rafa enters Fight for Your Life or activates Blade Fury. While Arc Knives duration is depleted, Rafa loses health instead. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy, he gains Overshield. So this has to be one of the coolest augments that we've actually got to play with. Essentially now your active skill just never ends until you die or until you just deactivate it yourself. So basically you can pop it, you'll have your normal bar, then once your bar goes away, you will stay in your action skill, but then you'll just start draining health. So if you have ways to lifesteal or keep your health up, this could be very, very good, because you quite literally can stay in your action skill for as long as you want to, and you even get the benefit of getting an overshield whenever you go for damage while in the action skill as well. So overall, if you want to play heavy into your action skill, you're for sure going to want to take this one, because it's going to give you the most uptime without a doubt. So our next skill is Diamond Hands. So dealing melee damage grants Rafa a stack of Diamond Hands. Gain increased gun damage for every stack of Diamond Hands. Once Rafa deals gun damage, stacks begin to decay quickly until they run out. So if you are playing heavy into melee, but you also want to incorporate some gun damage, this is going to be a pretty good skill to take. It has 100 stacks, and as you see, it is 2% per stack with 5 points in the skill. So I imagine it'll go to 10% per stack, so you can have 1,000% more gun damage if you are at max stacks. Yes, they will drain fast, and it probably will take a little bit to get to 100 stacks, but if you're in your super, you're constantly running around melee and things as it is, so this could be pretty easy to stack up. And if you have a very high damaging one-shot gun, once you get out of your super, you could just shoot that with that 1,000% extra damage. Pairing that with the other skills where you get more damage while your magazine's full from the other skill trees, this could be a pretty interesting one. Now next up is Saldar. So Rafa's melee critical hits gain lifesteal. So this is going to be great if you are playing into that augment we were just talking about, to where you drain health. Now you're just going to be able to get some health back. This obviously also plays well into our other skills, where we can build up crit chance if we're constantly meleeing enemies over and over again. You'll eventually guarantee that critical hit, and then you'll get lifesteal off of it. So this could be pretty good. Now our next skill is In the Zone. So Kill skill. Killing the enemy freezes Overdrive's duration. I think this skill is going to be very strong. It works very similar to the other skill where Overdrive just has increased duration, but this one just freezes it. As you see, it is plus 2 seconds or 3 points. So I imagine it's going to go to 6 seconds whenever you get a kill. It just freezes Overdrive's duration. So I think this is going to be better than the other skill, and it's also higher in the skill tree, and there doesn't seem to be any cooldown related to it. So just imagine you could pop your action skill, it already freezes, you get out, you then get kills, it freezes it again, you get your action skill back, you will then freeze it again once you repop the action skill. So you can basically just keep Overdrive up forever, and obviously Overdrive is a very crucial part to Rafa's kit. Now next up is To the Last. So Rafa gains increased gun damage and increased skill damage. The lower his health is, the greater the bonus. So even if you wanted to do some gun damage stuff here, this skill tree is not only for melee. This obviously is also going to pair very well with the other skill, to where it reduces our max health capacity, but increases our shield. So the lower the health we're going to get, the more damage we're going to get. If there's anything like a deathless artifact from Borderlands 3 in this game, this is obviously going to be a very, very strong skill. And then next up is hard shell. So whenever Rafa's shields break, he instantly gains a portion of his shield maximum capacity as overshield. The skill cannot be used again until Rafa activates his action skill. So just when you thought these shield skills was over, we have another one. So now whenever your shield breaks, you will get an overshield back based on the maximum shield capacity that you did have. This obviously will pair well with our other skills. So when your shield breaks, you spawn in grenades, so you can play around your shield breaking, getting it back extremely quick. And this doesn't inherently have a cooldown. It's just based on whenever you pop your action skill. So if you can pop your action skill a lot, which it seems like you're going to be able to do with Rafa, this could just keep reprocking over and over again. So this is going to be a very, very strong survivability skill if you are playing heavy into your shields. Now moving down to the bottom left, our first skill is going to be blowout. So whenever Rafa applies a heavy arms mark or critically hits an enemy with his action skill, they explode in corrosive lob projectiles. The longer Rafa's action skill has been active, the more corrosive projectiles spawn. So another skill based on how long your action skill has been active, now you're going to make corrosive blobs. So they really want you to play into, corrosive damage with this specific action skill. So now you can apply a mark, you could get a critical hit, which obviously is going to be very good with that other skill, and you can just start making these corrosive blobs. You're going to create more the longer you're in, so this is going to be a very good mobbing tool if I had to guess. Now for our augment in this part, we have Thunder Cutter. So Arc Knife's attacks deal shock, melee, splash damage. Rafa deals increased splash damage. So the cool part about this is that you're getting 50% more splash damage just for equipping this augment. So if you're just playing into some splash damage based build, it might be worth it just to take this augment on its own. But the other obviously really cool part is that your Arc Knives will deal shock and splash damage. So when you go in there for these normal melees now, you're going to cause explosions. They're going to do more damage because of the splash damage increase. And then again, pairing up the other skills to make the corrosive blobs, you're going to be able to just add clear and do huge AoE just by meleeing. Now next up is El Paraguas. So Rafa gains increased splash damage and increased splash damage critical hit chance. So this is playing into our augment very well, getting even more splash damage, but now our splash damage has an even higher crit chance. So you can basically make your melees a crit even more now, or at least the explosion that comes from them. I'm not sure if that will proc our other skills since it is splash damage getting the crits. I think that it's specifically only going to work with melee getting crits, but either or, obviously you're getting more damage here and even more AoE. Now our next skill is Shock Market. So whenever Rafa deals splash damage, deal bonus shock damage based on that damage dealt. So once again, even more splash damage skills here. So you're going to do even more shock damage whenever you deal splash damage. So just going in for your normal melee attacks, doing that shock splash damage, depending on how much that splash damage is doing, you're just going to do even more. And as you see, it is at 10% of damage dealt, and it goes up to 5 points. So I imagine it'll be 50%. So half of the damage that you are doing with these splash damages, you're just essentially doing them again, and it's just bonus shock damage. So this is going to be disgusting. The next up is Protecto Pulse. So pressing your right mouse button while Arc Knives are active, or Rafa re-triggers his action skill, drains a portion of Rafa's shields and deals that much shock damage to nearby enemies. So this is a 5-point scale, and right now it's at 20% of max shield. So I imagine at 5 points it will go to 100%. So you could just drain all your shields and essentially just get a ton of damage if you do have a lot of shields. Looping back around to the skill where you lose max health but gain max shield capacity, that's going to pair really well with this. Not sure how strong this is going to be, because I imagine just actively taking a shield off probably isn't the best thing to do, but if this does do a lot of damage, it's probably also does do splash damage, so this could be very, very good. Now our next up is Liquidation. So marked enemies killed by Rafa leave behind a corrosive hazard. So just when you thought AoE or mobbing wasn't going to be already strong with this specific skill tree over here, we have this. So now whenever you mark enemies, you kill them, you leave a corrosive hazard. Once again, a hazard is just going to be a little dot pool on the ground. So you're creating blobs, you're creating little pools of corrosive, you're creating giant shock explosions. This skill tree is going to be a ton of fun. Now for the capstone of this, we have Hurricane Special. So activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to spin his blades, creating a singularity that draws in all marked enemies and other nearby enemies while dealing continuous shock damage. Whenever his attack kills an enemy, Overdrives grants increased action skill cooldown rate. So this is really cool because this is essentially the spin to win capstone, because you can mark all the enemies, then activate Blade Fury. You're going to suck everybody in and constantly do shock damage while they're around you. This can be absolutely disgusting for Mobby, and based on the amount of kills you get with this attack, you also get even more action skill clear rate, so you can go back in your action skill even faster, which is good. This skill could be absolutely disgusting, and I can't wait to play around with it. Now next up is Artilleria. So ignore the other skill at the bottom down there. The skill we're looking at is Rafa gains increased ordnance cooldown rate. So this is a very good skill if you're playing into ordnance. Obviously Rafa does seem like he has a lot of things building into ordnance. You could take the one where getting a kill gives you ordnance cooldown rate. This just gives you base ordnance cooldown rate, so you're going to be able to spam grenades or whatever ordnance that you're using all the time. But with Rafa, you're probably going to want to use grenades for a lot of his skills, and one of those being this augment, so parting gift. So whenever Rafa activates his dash attack, he leaves behind a grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. Enemies damaged by these grenades become marked. Whenever Rafa applies a mark to an enemy, apply an additional mark. So just like a bunch of his other skills, it has the benefit that if you have a grenade equipped, it will use that grenade, which is obviously going to be very good if you have a very strong legendary grenade. But the other cool part is that now you can use your dash attack while in arc knives, and you basically just have free grenades going off, which is obviously going to be very good if you are playing into a grenade focused build. The other cool benefit is that whenever you apply a mark, you will also apply an additional mark. So if you're playing into anything that is heavy based on marks, this is going to be a good augment to take too. Now our next skill is Collaborate Ignition, so overdrive skill. Rafa deals bonus damage of his weapon as element with all skills and ordnance while overdrive is active. So this is going to be very solid because you're getting more ordnance damage or just skill damage in general based on whatever weapon you're holding. So it's 12% of weapon damage. You can go up to 5 times. So if you have a very high damage weapon, you could probably convert that into some crazy damage for whatever grenade that you are running. And this also takes your weapon element into consideration. So if you need a corrosive damage based thing, you could just swap to a corrosive weapon. Now your ordnance is doing corrosive damage. If you need incendiary, you can do that as well. And the cool part is that this also again does work with skills. It's not just for your ordnance. So if you are running your arc knives, you have your shock damage, corrosive damage, you take some of the other skills, and then you can also just run incendiary damage if you're holding an incendiary weapon. So this could be one of the strongest skills for Rafa, depending on how everything stacks up. The next up is Synergia. So whenever Rafa deals ordnance damage, he also deals increased gun damage and melee damage. This affects stacks. So this is cool, and it does seem that this has a stat count. So I imagine you could just keep going with this infinitely. So if you are throwing a bunch of grenades around, you're going to be able to stack up a bunch of gun damage and melee damage. Even if you aren't playing into a super heavy ordnance based build, just being able to throw this to get some extra damage for melee could be good. Also just gun damage as well. I think this is going to be pretty good depending on how things work. Say like dot damage from an ordnance grenade can actually proc this multiple times as the dot damage ticks. This could be very good, but if it is just the first hit from one grenade, I'm not sure how strong this will be. Now next up is Booming Business. So when Rafa critically hits an enemy, he gains a chance to spawn a free grenade. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a grenade based on that. So this is a 50% chance, and as you put points into it, it will actually reduce the cooldown time. So this could be very good as well. Obviously, you're going to be trying to go for critical hits for the most part. You can now just spawn free grenades. Again, it will spawn the grenade that you have equipped. What I'm interested in is that if your grenades have a way to crit, will it proc this passive skill right here? So you can basically throw a grenade, get this to proc, and then your grenade would just spawn another free grenade. I could potentially see this being very good. Now next up is Hemolition, so overdrive skill. While overdrive is active, Rafa may use grenades while cooling down at the cost of health. Every time a grenade is used this way, it costs more health until Rafa's grenade fully cools down. So this is just a 1-point skill, and this is going to allow you to throw even more grenades. Yes, it does use some of your current health, and that will keep stacking the more you throw. But if you have a way to lifesteal, I imagine this skill is going to be disgusting, because if there are some crazy ordnance grenades in the game that, you know, could just basically add an entire room, you could just throw these over and over again without really having to worry about the ordnance cooldown. And you're going to get your ordnance cooldown back so fast anyway, so you'll probably only throw like 2 or 3 of these and actually use some of your maximum health. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, and you just get double the grenades, which I think could be very strong. The next up is El Diablito. So a portion of fire damage Rafa deals also deals bonus fire ordnance damage. So this is going to be good because now any fire damage you do also is dealing ordnance damage. So if you build heavy into ordnance, now you can just, you know, do fire damage with your action skill. You can do fire damage with the weapon. You're then also going to do ordnance damage. As you see, it is at 10% of damage dealt, so it goes up to 5 points. So I imagine it'll go to 50%. This is going to be very strong. I assume even if you do fire ordnance damage, it's going to just do even more fire ordnance damage. Not exactly sure how that's going to work, but this could be a very good skill. Now for our capstone for this part, we have Inferno Protocol. So while arc knives are active, Rafa's exosuit stores all damage dealt to him. The exosuit then heats up and constantly deals a small amount of fire damage to him. Additionally, Rafa's melee attacks deal bonus fire damage. A portion of all damage dealt to Rafa is also dealt to enemies he has marked. Using Blade Fury causes Rafa to consume all stored damage and deal bonus fire damage based on stored damage. A portion of all damage dealt this way is returned to Rafa as health. So obviously this capstone is quite a lot, but I think the way you just want to think of it is that this is going to be the tanky action skill. So if you want to stay in your action skill for a while, this is going to be very solid because you store all the damage and just do fire damage to yourself. But as you mark enemies, that fire damage that you're doing to yourself is also going to be done to enemies as well. You also get the benefit now your arc knives also deal fire damage, so you compare that with our other skill we just talked about. So essentially you can make your axe skill do ordnance damage, and then if you use the blade fairy part of your axe skill, it's going to consume all the stored damage you did and deal bonus fire damage based on that stored damage to all the marked enemies, and then you will also heal an amount based off of that damage that you dealt. So essentially you just want to pop this, become very tanky, kind of just casually do some fire damage over time, and then you can mark everything in the action skill and you're gonna heal up a lot while also doing a lot of extra fire damage. Now moving down to the bottom right, we have El Borracho. So Rafa deals increased corrosive damage while his action skill is active. The longer it has been active, the greater the bonus. So this is literally just like our other skill up top. So we can set an action skill for longer, we're gonna deal bonus corrosive damage. So again, if you're really playing into keeping your action skill up, this is gonna be good. It is 1% per second, it can stack up to 5 points. I imagine it'll go to 5% per second, and this will work with any action skill. It's not just arc knives. So if you just want your peacebreaker cannons to also deal corrosive damage, you can take this skill as well. Now for our augment this part, we have acid drop. So arc knives dash attack is replaced with a caustic leap. Pressing your right mouse button causes Rafa to leap forward and create a caustic hazard whenever he lands. Whenever a mark is removed from an enemy, it explodes in a corrosive nova. So this is going to be a very fun skill to take. You essentially just replace a dash with a leap. So if you need to cover a lot of ground, this could be very good just as a movement tool, but you're going to also make that corrosive hazard when you land. Whenever you kill a marked target, you'll make a corrosive nova. So even more AoE here, and you also just get the leap attack, which is pretty cool. Now next up is Impage. So Rafa gains increased action skill duration. Obviously a very simple one here. You want to play heavy into keeping your action skill up. This is definitely going to be one you want to take. Now next up is sustainable energy. So overdrive skill. Rafa gains health generation based on how much overdrive time is remaining. So this one you're getting health generation now while overdrive is active. That's going to pair well with our augment that obviously reduces your health. If your action skill ends, you're now just going to be able to keep healing up over and over again, because again, overdrive is pretty much going to always be active. But it says based on how much overdrive time is remaining. I'm not sure if it means you're going to have more benefit as it gets lower or more benefit as it gets higher, but regardless, health generation is always nice, and it is going to be max health per second. So if you have a lot of health, you're going to be generating quite a lot. Now our next skill is Motivar. So pressing your right mouse button during arc knives grants increased overdrive duration. This bonus is reset whenever Rafa activates an action skill. So if you were worried about overdrive ending, you can now just press your other button during arc knives and you will get even more overdrive duration. And then if you activate your action skill, this bonus is reset, but you can obviously hit the button again to get even more duration. So overall, this seems like a pretty good skill. I think this is just going to be dependent on how often we can keep overdrive up. Again, if you have other ways to keep it up permanently, this skill is going to be kind of pointless, but if you don't have that, I think this skill could be pretty good. Now for our final skill over here, we have Cruel Acreal. So Rafa gains increased skill damage with all skills. The longer his action skill has been active, the greater the bonus. So this works just like our other corrosive one. The longer we're in our action skill, the more skill damage we're going to be doing. So just staying in your arc knives forever is going to grant you a ton of extra damage, so it's going to be very beneficial to do so if you are playing into arc knives. This also does increase skill damage, so if you have any other skill damage based thing, you'll even get a bonus for that as well. Now moving on to our capstone, we have Galvanic Panic. So whenever Rafa performs a melee attack while arc knives is active, fire an acid storm glider at an enemy in his view. Acid storm gliders deal corrosive splash damage based on the number of total marked enemies. Additionally, killing an enemy while arc knives is active restores action skill duration. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to fire a volley of acid storm gliders in front of him and in arc knives. So if you want to last in your action skill even longer, this is going to be a great capstone to take, because now when you get a kill with arc knives, you're going to get increased skill duration. But on top of that, now whenever you're doing melee attacks, you're causing out these, storm gliders come out that are doing corrosive splash damage. I imagine this capstone is going to pair very well with the other left side of the skill tree with all the splash damage bonuses that we are getting, because you can cause even more. You're going to be in your action skill a lot longer too. So if you can kind of branch into both of them, I think this is going to be a very good combination. But on top of that, if you do activate Blade Fury, so if you end your action skill, you're going to shoot out a volley of these storm gliders that go out and do even more damage. So I think this is going to be a very, very good skill to take, again, if you do want to play into your arc knives pretty much 24/7. But all right, that is going to do it all for Rafa's skill trees. Let me know what you all think about in the comments below. Obviously his whole shtick is that you want to activate his passive with his axe skills. You can chain his axe skills quite a lot. He has very cool axe skills as well, and he has a bunch of skills that really synergize with that whole playstyle. If you want to go for a melee build, a defensive build, a gun build, everything is in this kit. There's a lot of cool things you can do. Rafa ended up being most people's favorite during our play tested event. I still preferred Vex because I'm just a Siren guy at heart. character Rafa was also a ton of fun to play, and I think you all are going to love him as well. Speaking of Vex though, if you would like to see her skill tree breakdown, I also have that up on my channel. Fingers crossed after I edit this video is going to be shorter than the Vex one, but if you want to sit through a whole hour of me doing this exact same thing just with Vex skill tree, definitely be sure to check that video out, alongside also checking out my first impressions video as well. A lot of work went into both of those videos, and I would greatly appreciate you all giving them a watch. Anyways though, that's going to do it all for me. More Borderlands 4 content will be coming on the channel, so be sure to stick around. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.